Welcome to the Worth Listening podcast, where we focus on having positive and productive conversations around money. I'm your host, Lauren, a 4-time Olympian and certified financial planner. On this show, my guests share their money stories. Everyone has a unique story and experiences both wins and losses when it comes to money. My intent is to give listeners something they can relate to, something that builds their courage to be open and take control of their own money story. When I'm not creating a great show for my listeners, I'm running my company, Worth Winning, where I help individuals and families organize their finances. Check us out at worth-winning.com. All right, now on with the show. You've probably heard the term self-care popping up all over the place lately. We're seeing examples of people trying to prioritize their mental wellness in the sports world and professional world. One place we're not hearing a whole lot about self-care, though, is in personal finance. Never fear, leave it to me to cover the topics nobody else wants to. The theme of our next 3 episodes is mental wealth. Our money mindset affects our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. In short, it affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps us determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. We know we need money to have and do the things we want in our life, but sometimes the drive to obtain it leads us down a path that we didn't expect. Money can become a major source of stress in our lives and our relationships. This is where today's guest specializes. Amy Scott is a certified financial coach who teaches couples how to get on the same page about money. I know, people are already trying to find her information. Googling her right now. Don't Google, drive, and listen to the episode. But this is super duper important because marriage has enough challenges. So stressing about money should not be one of them. And Amy is passionate about helping couples live a life with less conflict and more space to focus on what really matters to them. She spent the last 7 years teaching couples using her unique budgeting system, which gives them the confidence and peace of mind in making financial decisions together. She's worked with hundreds of couples to reduce financial stress and disagreements, allowing them to pursue the dreams that had previously gone unfulfilled. I just know that her personal story and journey is going to speak to those who may be struggling to get on the same page with their spouse or significant other. So let's get the show on the road. Amy, I'm so excited to have you on the show. This is going to be the coolest series to be able to talk about self-care. And I am just glad that we came and crossed paths with one another. I think we should get started, though, by just learning a little bit about who you are, where you come from. So just take it away and give us your introduction.
Okay. Well, where I come from. All right. Well, I grew up in Connecticut, although I live in Baltimore now. I married someone who's the youngest of 8 kids in Baltimore. And most of them, including our 31 nieces and nephews, don't leave the Baltimore area. So we've been here as long as we've been married the last 15 years. And we've got a couple of sons, Henry and Ben, and they're 11 and 13, just entering that preteen/teenager phase. So spending a lot of time as a family with just the 4 of us, but also our extended parent family, most of whom live in this area, like I said. So
wow, that is a large family. I can see exactly why you would want to be located near them despite being from Connecticut. Let's go back a little bit and talk about that Connecticut upbringing. What was it like growing up? What did your parents do? Did you have siblings? What kind of things were happening in your household, kind of money-wise? Break it down for us.
Okay. Yeah, great. So I do have siblings. I have 3 brothers. We were all born within 4 years. The last 2 were twins. That's how that happened. My mom wanted 3 kids. She always wanted 3 kids and she got bonus. So she had 4 kids. And I share that because she was a stay-at-home mom. She hung out with us. She took care of us. And really to support my dad, now that I'm an adult and an entrepreneur and have been for the last 7 years, I started asking my dad a lot of questions because he ran his own business. He was an entrepreneur. And I think as a kid, even as a young adult, I did not appreciate what that meant. But what I have found is that talking to my parents, my dad actually worked in insurance sales for several years. And when all 4 kids were young, he came to my mom and said, I'd really like to be able to start my own company. I think I can do a great job of leading, kind of like when you're in insurance or other industries, like continuing education credits, right? For different insurance agencies. I think I can be a really good trainer, teacher. I'd like to try it. I'd like to go out on a limb and try to build this business. And my mom, because she's amazing, said, all right, let's do this. Let's make this happen. So I share that, Lauren, because growing up, my dad, he left every Sunday and he would come back every Friday night, and he would travel all over the United States, and he built a business doing these insurance trainings. And my mom was home to hold down the home front. And she was the one, she grew up in a challenging financial situation. Growing up, her family did not have a lot of money. Her mom worked really hard, and she brought some of those values and the ways that she saw her mom manage money into our family. So one of those ways that manifested was the thermostat in Connecticut, which is kind of cold, would never go above 63 degrees.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, my dad was always the one like trying to push it up to like 64, 65 when he came home. And she'd go chasing him around saying, you can't be running this business and doing this if we don't do some of these things, which for her was, keeping the heat low, keeping meals on the table, doing a lot of cooking, and like keeping our expenses really as low as possible as a family for him to be able to fulfill on that dream. So I learned a lot from that.
So she was kind of managing like the household expenses then and keeping the budget and paying the bills, et cetera, while he was out making the money. Is that accurate?
100%, 100%. And he does really, my parents are in their late 70s now, but he really acknowledges her for that. Like, I don't think we would have made it without her, for lack of a better expression, like penny pinching. I mean, one example that my older brother told just over a year ago, I didn't remember it until he shared this, was that there was a new McDonald's in our town. And so kids were, Mickey D's, we're going to Mickey D's, right? My mom's all, no, we're not going to Mickey D's. That's not what we do. But because she was so amazing, she literally created Happy Meals once a month at our house. Yeah, where she would write notes and she'd bake chicken nuggets and she'd make the French fries and all the things, right? So she was committed that we got those things and found a way to have everything work. But she was on top of the numbers for our family.
I love that as an example. Like, what a cool thing. We talk so much about how to be able to keep expenses low. And I think some of it is like the pressure of other kids get to do this, or I want to be a good parent. So I want to, I want my kids to have things that other people are having, but to be able to like kind of be thoughtful about like, how can I give them something that is important to them, but also, like you said, within our budget, and make sure that it's, I love that idea. Like the homemade Happy Meal. And it was probably better for you, not, like you said, to bake chicken nuggets instead of fried.
Yes, I'm sure it was. She found lots of creative ways to really provide for us. And now as a mom, like I said, of boys 11 and 13, I feel a lot of that pressure to keep up with the Joneses in a way that I'm sure she experienced to a certain extent as our mom.
Mm-hmm. What about allowance? Like, how was she helping or talking to you all about money as she was going through managing the household finances?
I will tell you, I'm not trying to throw her underneath the bus or my dad underneath the bus, but like, we did not get allowance. That was not on their budget. I did the math the other day. I think I was 11 years old when I started babysitting. Like one family on our street left me with their 4 children. I cannot believe this at 11 years old. 4 children that paid me $2 an hour. So that's how I started making money, honestly, Lauren. But my parents did not give us money. I remember being over our girlfriends in high school and we were having dinner together with her family and we were going to go out. And her dad said, oh, well, here's $20. And I had never seen that before. My parents never handed me cash in that way. And I just thought we could do anything to spare this $20. But in our house, it was really like, you do your chores because that's part of taking care of the family. So I didn't learn a lot about money from that. And from my parents necessarily, I saw them working hard. I think now upon reflection with my brothers, I think I could feel the months where maybe my dad wasn't doing as well with his business, and definitely the months where he was doing better with his business. She was a saver. She'd squirrel away that money, and he was definitely the spender. But they never talked to us about, oh, this month we maybe don't have as much. They just kept the same face.
Gotcha. And which creates a stability for the children. I think that's a skill in and of itself to be able to not have the children realize in the moment that things are a little bit tighter or, like you said, when things are going well, that kind of create that even kill momentum in a household.
Yeah, true.
Okay, so let's fast forward to you being kind of in high school. We talked about your first job as a babysitter. Did things change as you got older? Were there discussions about college and how that was going to be paid for? That's usually like the next big expense that comes up before we're adults.
Yes, for sure. So yeah, I continued to do all that babysitting. I remember my senior year of high school getting a job as a waitress and realizing pretty soon on that that was the hardest job. I look back now and I'm like, that was the hardest job I ever had. But I did that throughout my senior year of high school and into college. And definitely we had conversations about college. At one point, I believe one year my parents had 4 kids in college at the same time. And then the other year, it was always 2, if not 3. Like, my brother took a gap year and then the twins started at different times. And so I share that because really, when we were applying for financial aid, I'm older than you. I go back a little bit older than you. But when we were applying, I think there were more opportunities for me to get grants and to get loans. I was a good student, but also because so many of us were in school at the same time. And my dad was a business owner with fluctuating income. So it made it doable for us. I grew up in Connecticut, but I poo-pooed the idea of going to college anywhere in New England. I was like, oh, this is an opportunity to go far away from home, a pretty safe way to be able to go far away from home. And so I ended up going to school for a year and a half in Tennessee before I moved back up to New England and Massachusetts. But yeah, my parents sat down. I remember them doing the FAFSA with me. I remember my dad saying, like, we'll do what we can. And the rest you're going to need to figure out. And I also remember being at school and friends who had their parents like giving them money, like monthly allowance, maybe at school. And that was never talked about with my parents. I did work study. I worked in the summers. Like it was kind of assumed that we're going to do the best we can, but you're going to need to figure out how to feed yourself beyond the feeding plan, the dining plan kind of thing. Right. That was really on me and on my brothers to figure that out.
I think you bring up a good point too about the idea of like, maybe sometimes it not being discussed, and generally say like more discussion is better. But like the fact that like it wasn't discussed didn't make you feel like you were missing out on anything. It was like, this is just the way it is. And being able to create, there's not a gap here because this is not a thing that, we're going to address. We're not going to feel bad. It's just like, this is what we are going to talk about. And these are the things that are important. And they were being very intentional about how they can help. I think that's cool as well. All right. So we make it through college. It sounds like you maybe had a little bit of student loan debt.
I did. I wish I knew exactly how much. I feel like for me, it was about 25,000, which at that time felt significant because there were a lot of things I wanted to be able to do that I think my payment was around a few $100s a month. But again, I'm a little bit older and the interest rate was lower on loans at that time. So it didn't feel quite crippling, but it was something that was there for sure.
Right. And so now it's time to like adults, you're out of high school, you're over 18, you're out of college. Like you said, the student loan debt is kicking in. What were you thinking to the best of your memory about like how to organize your finances? Did you have a budget? Were you talking to your friends about money? What was happening during that time period financially?
I'm going to tell you, like, now I work as a financial coach. I can look back and say, like, I was doing things probably differently than other people. I definitely have my mom's saver soul. So I knew I wanted to be able to travel. So I paid ahead on my student loans because I wanted to have the option to be able to take some time off from paying those. So I found ways to budget. I found ways where I was living. I remember my first year after college, there were 6 of us. 6 people in a house with 6 rooms. So there were 6 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. But I remember one guy said, Amy, stop putting water into the dish soap in the kitchen. We can tell you're doing that because it was like a communal, living space.
They were using way too much soap.
Exactly. I was just always the one who was trying to keep the expenses low. And now reflecting back on it, again, it was because I wanted to have experiences. My parents were definitely, and I know this was led by my dad, he's very into having experiences. So when I was growing up, anytime money was spent that was outside of the month to month, it was on doing something together as a family. So it was on spending a week at the beach where my dad used to be a lifeguard in Maryland because he grew up in Maryland, or it was my dad every other year would teach in Walt Disney World, like do his trainings down in Orlando. And we would drive 2 days from Connecticut down to Orlando. But every other year, my brothers and I got to go to Disney World. Now, we did walk around Disney World with PB&Js.
That was also back when they allowed food inside of Disney World. Now you got to buy that $50 peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right?
Exactly. Exactly. No, my mom was masterful. Like, I need the Mickey Mouse ice cream for you. She just did that. But any money that was spent outside of the norm was around experiences. And I share that because when I graduated from college, I knew that I wanted to do some traveling. I was interested in being in the Peace Corps. I was interested in traveling overseas. And so I was able to kind of hoard, sort of like how I learned from my mom, what I could. And then I was able to travel before I really buckled down.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And I also like the way that you mentioned the living with six people. So, so often people get out of college and they're like, okay, I'm a grown up now. I got to go, buy a house, or I have to go have my own apartment. Or the discussion now is starting to be had slowly but surely about it's okay to move back in with your parents to get on your feet. It's okay to have a roommate to keep expenses low while you take care of student loan debt. And it sounds like, right out the gate, you were like, I have to live with these six people, and this is what I got to do to be able to reach my other financial goals. But I think we definitely need to be having more conversation around what is it that's going to help me get where I want to go, and what short-term sacrifices, or what could, not really even sacrifices. I don't like the word sacrifice, but what short-term choices do I need to make in order to be able to get to the things that I want? So take us through kind of like, okay, we're traveling to Peace Corps. Bring us from Peace Corps to where we are today.
So I spent that time in the Peace Corps, and then I worked as a women's health volunteer and found a real passion around international women's health. So when I came back from the Peace Corps, I went to graduate school and got my master's in public health with a concentration on international health, and thought, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to travel all over the world. I'm going to help women around health. And then I placed a Craigslist ad. And Craigslist was very new in Baltimore. It was a dare from one of my friends. And my one criteria to write back to people was that they had to not ask for a picture. So out of my 30 or so replies that I got, again, this is going on, I don't know, close to 20 years ago. I got this one guy. He did not ask for a picture. We started emailing back and forth. He seemed pretty great. We met each other. We forgot to tell each other. We forgot to ever send a picture. So we actually didn't know what each other looked like when we met for that blind date a few weeks later. But we found each other. And that is now my husband.
Wait, so you're telling me that you met your husband on Craigslist?
I did. Besides buying and selling lots of cars and all the other things I've done on Craigslist, yes, I did meet my husband. It was his first time on Craigslist, Lauren. And he was looking, his first time ever logging into it, and he was looking for a motorcycle.
And he found a wife instead.
He went, and when he did not find one, he was like, let's check out the personals. He did. And that's how we met. And my trajectory shifted, and we got married. And this is where I don't know, for lack of a better word, the bad financial decisions started. This is where a line in the sand, like, had done pretty well. Up to that point, was a saver, really saw exactly what you said. I don't love that word sacrifice either, but I like to see, like, what can I give up in this season, or what changes can I make in this season so I can have what I want in the future, whether that's a month, 6 months, a year, 5 years down the road. And I was really good about that. And then Mick and I got married, and the ongoing narrative all around us was buy a house, got to buy a house. 5 days after we got married, he started in the Baltimore City teacher's residency. He's in his 16th year as a high school teacher, but that was his first opportunity as a teacher. And everyone's like, oh, they have a special loan program. They give grants to city teachers. This is what you should be doing. Got married in late June and ended up buying that house in September. Again, you're a little younger than me, so you not remember, but 2006 was not a good time to buy a house.
I bought one then too. So there's a whole podcast episode about it.
Oh, well, I haven't heard that podcast. I will go find that one. Because for us, we found this house, and looking back, it's like, people are like, well, did you want to have kids? Yeah. Well, you bought a 12-foot wide row home in Baltimore in an area that maybe didn't have schools you want to send your kids to. And it's like, we just were not thinking ahead. It was like the thing to do. And I share that because we liked the house, we liked the neighborhood. And within a few years, we had 2 boys back to back. And at that time, I really, with my second son, sleep deprived, wake up in the morning, even if the kid was sleeping, the toddler's running around. He wasn't even 2 yet, my first son. And one night I got up the courage. I remember being in tears and saying to my husband, like, I'm not ready to go back to work. Like, I'm having anxiety thinking about going back to work. I know this wasn't in our plan. I was working in nonprofits at the time in Baltimore. And I just said, I just want to have this as an option, like maybe 4 to 6 months. Do you think we can do that? And he and I were both like, yeah, we can do that. We've been pretty good around our money. Like, we have this house, we're managing our cash flow, our budget, whatever. But when we sat down and looked, really took a deep dive into our numbers, the reality was we could not survive on just my husband's income. Like, we didn't have enough money coming in. I share that because it was like a turning point for me. I'm not willing to not have this as an option. And how come nobody's talking about this? And I'm definitely one for personal responsibility, but I thought, wow, why didn't we just sit down with someone and kind of plan a few years of our life? Maybe not 30 to 40, but like what the next 3 to 5 years were going to look like. Maybe we would have made different decisions. And so at that time, that's when I got really interested in our finances, dug in, looked at our income, looked at our expenses, and realized that we actually had a much smaller gap than I thought we did. We really only needed, in addition to my husband's salary, about $600 a month, not the full salary I was making. And that was just like game on, like game on. What do we need to do to be able to bring in this $600? And I don't know how you feel, but I feel like as soon as I share that and put that out there, opportunities for making that money presented themselves to my husband and I, as far as some tutoring my husband did, some handyman work, babysitting some extra kids. And before you knew it, we were bridging that gap every month and more. And because I became so interested in our finances, I'm like, well, I wonder if we could lower our mortgage. Like, let me look this up. And this is embarrassing to admit, but when I looked into our mortgage, I saw, Lauren, I don't even think they have these kind of loans anymore. We had a 35-year mortgage. In my mind, we had a 30-year mortgage. Like, that's what everybody said you're going to get. Again, personal responsibility. We had signed the papers on it, but it was a 35-year loan. The first 5 years were interest only.
Oh, man.
And I almost fell to my knees thinking that the last few years, the work we've been putting in and the sacrifice, and again, this is not some crazy, huge, lavish home, right? Just realizing that, like, whoa, okay. And then the other piece I realized was, what is this extra charge of like $165 a month? What is this? And that's when I first learned about private mortgage insurance.
That PMI will get you. Right?
That PMI. And I'm calling them like, how can I lower that? They're like, you've paid off like 2% of your loan. Calm down. You're not anywhere close to that.
Right.
I know you talk about this a lot, but like that financial literacy, those things we didn't know that we didn't know, it lit a fire underneath us. And I realized that I had a real passion around personal finances and people being able to choose how they wanted to live their lives, have those options. So I started having friends ask, how are you doing this? I know you had a podcast episode on scary questions. I got all those questions like, well, how are you making more money? Did you borrow money? Do you have a loan out on your home so that you cannot be working? And I'd say, no, we have clarity around what we need. We've created a budget. We're planning our work and working our plan. If you want to know about it, come over 12 to 2 when my kids are napping and I'll tell you about it. And that's how my business started, was honestly at our kitchen table, being like, show me all your money and helping people create plans.
We interrupt your regularly scheduled programming to bring you this important message. It's just me, guys, but I wanted to share something with you. At the beginning of 2022, I'm going to be leading a 12-week live online program called Welcome to Wealth. This class will meet virtually every week to walk through the steps of creating your own personalized financial plan to help you work toward achieving the things that you truly want in life. This is going to be a really practical way to show yourself financial self-care. And of course, our first module is going to be money mindset. If this sounds interesting, stay tuned. I'm going to be sharing a special discount on the next episode for anyone who wants to pre-register for the program. All right, back to the show. I bet it resonates with so many people to just kind of feel like you're in the rat race. And like you said, you're just trying to stay alive. It's like work, eat, take the kids to school, repeat. We got to make money. And you don't realize that by simply setting aside just a little bit of time initially to, like you said, just comb through the finances, understand, oh, okay, this is our actual need. Here's the black hole that money is going into. And here's a much smaller hole. I really love that part where you like, it's $600, not a full salary, not a full amount that is going to allow us to still be able to achieve our goals financially and also give me the time. I don't need to spend 40 hours a week with all this extra income. I just need to find enough income, or we just need to find enough income in order to be able to meet this particular goal. And then we can also have the values and the vision that we have for our family and being a mom taken care of. And then to start sharing that with other people, I think is also super duper cool. Like you said, come during nap time and I'll help you do what we did so that you can get this clarity, because people do start to ask questions when you start to make changes. And they're just like, wow, you must be so rich. You must be so famous. You must be doing something. Did you hit the lottery? But it's actually about getting organized around your finances. So I know there's like 6 questions that you have that you can ask your spouse as it pertains to thinking about money. So tell me more how you were interacting during this time to kind of get the clarity that you guys have around your finances.
I think that's so great. I think about it now because I think about with clients that I work with, like, where do you start, right? So I think where you start from is being curious. And I don't think Mick came to me and was like, hey, how are you feeling? Do you want to change anything? Like, is there anything you want to talk about? But I think I basically had that meltdown. And he said, this is not going to work. It's not going to work for our marriage. This is not going to work for our kids. We need to figure out a different way to do this. I think back now and I'm like, of course he would be open to that. But at the time, I felt this sense of guilt that was like, oh, the burden's going to be on him to bring in that income, let alone that I was going to be home with these 2 crazy boys. But, like I thought in my mind, like, I don't want to have that burden on him. But once he said, like, let's be curious, let's start exploring what different options could be. And I'm willing to do things differently than how we're doing them. That just opened the floodgates for us. And it's been something that's been a thread throughout our relationship. One of those main questions that we consistently ask around like money meetings or together is there anything that you want, either as an item or an experience or a feeling that you don't feel comfortable bringing up because you're afraid we don't have the money for it, or you're afraid of what my reaction's going to be? So that's been something like that I kind of backpedaled to, that like, if he'd come and said that to me as I was upset, but not sharing with him, that's the question that would have really opened up. So that's a question I so encourage couples to ask and continue to ask.
That is huge, to be able to just put it out there to say like, hey, there might be something, because we all have those things and you're like, I know how he's going to react. I don't want to talk about this, but I also really want this thing. To create space by simply asking the question as the other person, puts you in a better mood to be receptive of the information. And then it puts the person who, has this thing that they're afraid to bring up in a place where, now the space is clear to be able to ask that question and talk about what that need or that want or that goal is.
Yeah. I agree. And my experience with people were like, I never knew that's what she was going to say, or I never knew that's what he was going to say. Right. And things are continually coming up, especially in this time of COVID. Like I said, my husband's a high school teacher, so he was home for a long time. All of a sudden, our life was kind of thrown up with all of us at home. And I remember starting to ask him, like, do you still want to be teaching? Like, the landscape is changing. The responsibilities had shifted for him. And my husband's very like loyal person. And really like, well, I said I would do this, I'm going to continue to do this. I'm like, I'm not telling you to quit tomorrow. I'm just saying, is there anything that you haven't expressed to me that you potentially want for your future, right? Or an experience you want to have? So I'll just share that in the past like year, he always thought I was crazy for being an entrepreneur, but he's created his own business called New Site Education, where he does coaching with teachers. And I share that just because it's the kind of thing that, like, if we weren't having these kind of conversations, it may be something that's like a twinkle in the back of his head, but that we may have never come up in the busyness of life that you're talking about.
It sounds like it was never really like a huge stressor because you guys kind of like, as soon as the pain point hit with this gene needs to change, you started to work together. But I know you work with a bunch of couples and people as they try to organize their finances. Why do you think that finances are such a huge stress, point for so many people in marriages? Like what is the thing that is causing so much stress as it pertains to finances for married people in general?
Well, I think there's probably a lot of different opinions about that, but I'll give mine. I mean, I think finances thread their way into every single area of our life. And we don't necessarily sit down and say, this is how I grew up with money. This is my background. These are my expectations. Like, we don't have that conversation until things really hit ahead. And I think, just doing a little preparation can go a long way inside of a couple. I mean, even for my husband and I, there are things that we don't necessarily agree on, but we agree that we need a plan. And we come together around what that plan is. But I think, again, because people have such different experiences and it's so weighted, right? It's weighted around like the income that people are making and so many shoulds. It's this conversation of like, well, we should be doing better. We should be making more. You should be doing this. I feel like that fuels a lot of those arguments and disagreements. And if you could just take that word should out and be more grounded in the why and be curious and ask questions of each other and listen, it would really go a long way. But I think the biggest piece is because of this, how things should be.
It's like chasing the light at the end of the tunnel, or, some sort of like mountain peak that we have to get to. The should is like way down the road, but it's like actually the how maybe even is so much more important. How do we get where we want to go versus like what should we be doing to get to this, place that is not really clear, like we need to really define that as even a thing.
Yeah. We have to really have that conversation and get clear about what it is that we really want. Take the time to be able to do that, get aligned with each other and say like, okay, then how can we make this work? Right. And that takes, like you said, in the busyness of life, when this comes up, sitting down and having some of those conversations with each other. I think the other piece, at least in my experience working with couples, is that often I hear people say a lot like, oh, spender and saver. And I have seen that, like in a lot of couples, opposites attract. They say you may have someone who's more interested in saving and someone who's more interested in spending. I don't quite see it through that lens. In my experience, what causes a lot of disagreements and stress around money, and I don't care if your couple is making $75,000 a year or $275,000 a year, the big issue is that they're not seeing things, they are not seeing the entire picture in the same way. So if I talk to one member of the couple and they tell me all what's going on, and then I talk to the other member of the couple, oftentimes there's vastly different stories around what's happening with their money, what they have, what they don't have. It's almost like when you look at a bank account with a couple and there's, say 5,000 in there and one person's like, woohoo, 5,000, sweet. And the other person's like, oh, 5,000. Oh my gosh, we're really in trouble, right? Like such different interpretations. And because again, money threads throughout life, what I've seen is that people are spending money because we're all spending money, and they don't necessarily see how those everyday choices they make around finances connect to their short, medium, long-term goals. And so both people are kind of going around like in their own silo with their blindsiders on. They're just going along saying, I'm doing the best I can. And I think they are doing the best they can given the information that they have. But my job is to really take those blinders off and have them see the big picture together. And I think when they do, it's a lot easier to make decisions because we can both see things clearly. It can take work to get to that point.
I think the key thing that it takes to get to that point is, like you said, to having the discussions and creating space to have the discussions. That is such an important part of the overall process, which is why this podcast even exists, is because it's so important to have discussions about money.
Yeah.
My question for you is like, now that you're in financial coaching, you still have friends, you have family around you, this kind of like immediate circle of people. Are they open to having discussions? How open are the people around you? Not like, do they look at you as like a financial professional and they're like, I don't want to talk about this? Are people still in general pretty scary about money? Or have you found any like cool things that make talking about money with the people in your inner circle less awkward?
Mm-hmm. Yes and no. It really depends on the people. Some people, so I'll tell you, I mean, I've been at this for over 7 years. And when I first went into the world of finances, I was not a financial coach. I didn't know that was a thing. That was not one of the options that was out on the table. I became a financial advisor and sold products and worked with couples for 4 years before becoming a coach a few years ago. When I realized that that was a thing and I was much better in alignment with my skills. But I will say that as an advisor, people were more comfortable coming to me to sell them a particular product, whether it was life insurance or Roth IRA or whatever. But I would then say, okay, that's great. Now you've got what you need as far as this product, but let's talk about cash flow. Let's talk about getting organized around your finances. And some people would lean into it right away, and some people would be less open to having that conversation. But what I saw over and over, I think people now, they're trusting me more around it. So maybe not family as much, but as far as friends go, people ask me a lot of questions. And I now have created this like monthly free workshop. It's like a budgeting workshop for couples that I do online. And I'm seeing a lot of friends come into that because I think that's a safer space than just them sitting down with me. So I try to have people talk about money. I'm on Team Lauren. Like I want all those conversations to be had. But what I find challenging is that often one person wants to have it and the other person doesn't want to have it. That's probably the biggest obstacle that I come against. And that's why I particularly work with couples, because I have 10 plus years of experience in an organization called Couples Coaching Couples, where my husband and I have been coached and coached other couples, healthy couples who want to have thriving relationships. It's not specific to money, but those soft skills play into those conversations. So I try to present it as I'm the person who can get your spouse who never wants to talk about money, talking about money.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I bet people are like, where do I find her information already? Hold on. Never fear. We'll get there. Because they're like, I definitely want to talk about money. I'm listening to this podcast, but I can't get my spouse to listen. I know someone out in the audience and feeling that. But before we move on to, like you said, the wrap up process, I just want to ask one more question about like how you're thinking for your sons around money. What kind of conversations are being had in the household? I know you said there wasn't a lot of conversation when you were growing up, even though there was like a nice, neat kind of packaged way that household expenses were being organized. Like, how are you handling making sure that your sons have good education around finance?
I'm trying my best. I will tell you, I lean into a lot of other people who are experts in this area. That's the first thing that I do is I'm not trying to have this figured out. That's not necessarily my niche around finances. So I think a few of the things I want my kids to know that money comes from work, right? And there are particular things, this is similar to my upbringing, but like there are particular things we do to contribute to the family. I remember my son saying a few years ago, like, I keep putting the laundry away and you're not paying me. And I'm like, that's part of your job in this family. And when we got clarity around that, like, here's the list of things to be done in the family, that really made a difference for him. And then I saw somebody on Facebook or Instagram who was like, I have these jobs that are outside of the regular roles, the regular chores, and I will put them up on the fridge with money attached to them. So I started doing this where it's like, for example, like clean out the mudroom. That's not necessarily on their chore list, but like clean out the mudroom and attach a couple dollars to that so that they can go and choose, I'm going to do that task and I will get paid for doing that particular task. So assigning a dollar amount to those different chores, trying to get creative what those are and how they can really support my husband and I and not create more work with us. Cause like sometimes with kids, you have them do stuff and you're like, oh, now I have to do that over. But that's when I'm teaching them. And the other thing I feel like I'm teaching them is we're very transparent as far as finances go. So one of the things I teach my couples who tend to overspend or feel like they're overspending in the day-to-day expenses, not the regular bills, is to set up a separate spending account for day-to-day spending and only use that account for the day-to-day. And that is an account that we share with our boys so that they know they can access it And so if it's Wednesday and they want to go out and get pizza, they can see how much money is in the day-to-day spending. And they know, oh, we're getting paid Friday. Okay, we can have pizza and we can get gas in the car. Like they understand how much things cost. And they're part of that conversation of like, well, but if you get that pizza, we're not going to be able to go to the bounce place, for example. I want them to see around money that like, yes, you make choices and there's impacts from the choices you make, but you have options.
I love it. How old are your boys now?
They're 11 and 13.
All right. So 11 and 13, like you said, they have access to an account. They understand like this is our family monthly spending or daily spending, you're even saying. And here's the parameters we have to work within. Like, I don't know anyone that has said they were having that level of transparency, but what a cool thing to do so that they actually understand, like, we are working for our dollars and these, some of the dollars are for us to do discretionary things with, but they're limited. And so we have to decide as a household how we're going to spend those dollars. And like you said, if it's pizza now, then maybe we can't do so-and-so later. And then being able to see the actual account going down, I think is very valuable. And then I also love, attaching. So you visually get to see, here's a chore. Here's the thing. Like, I want money. I want to go get with my friends. I want to go to I don't know. People don't go to the arcade anymore. Like you said, that's us dating ourselves again. But they want to go
buy Roadbucks.
Roadbucks. Okay. So that's where they want to go now. I don't have any children. Yeah, they're like, oh, what can I do to get some money real quick? They go look at the refrigerator, see what, like, here's the thing, and see how much money is attached to it. Like, oh, this is a higher yield, harder task. Here's something that's like a quick and it's only going to get me one smoothie or one drink or a candy bar, etc. But it puts a visual to it as well to say, like, here's something to be motivated by. I think those are great things to be able to motivate your children and may help them understand that, like, money is this tool. And it's appropriate to decide based on what your goals are. What are you willing to do in order to attain those dollars? This has been excellent. Oh my goodness. I have loved this episode. I can't wait for it to come out. We are headed to what we call the final sprint, where I'm going to rapid fire some questions at you.
Okay.
So are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. You've got $20 in your pocket right now. What do you spend it on?
I probably spend it on pizza for my family because that makes my sons very happy.
I was going to say at 11 and 13, they probably love pizza and they're eating machines right now, right?
They're eating machines. And it's all about food. Or I would probably go to the store and buy a bunch of snacks. And when I pick them up from school, just give them a whole bunch of different snacks that they didn't expect. I love to surprise them with things like that.
And they're super appreciative.
They are so appreciative. Even if I bring them like smoothies and some Pringles, they think they're over the moon happy. Yeah.
I love it. All right. Best advice you've ever received?
Oh gosh, there's so many things. I think it's probably from my relationship with Mick. The best advice that we've received is, I don't know, it's a little cliche, but to be in communication, with each other and to trust each other with our hearts.
Trust each other with our hearts. I love that. What about worst money habit?
Oh, worst money habit. Oh, I am like, love to see my every dollar being used, right? So sometimes I'm very comfortable with my account going low, right? And my husband doesn't love that. He loves to see an abundance of money in there. So sometimes like the habit is just like, oh, well, we can spend all this and see it go low because we know that we're going to be okay with it. But the habit is not necessarily making sure that that's okay with him, like honoring how that feels.
I like that. Some people think that because we are in the financial profession that we don't have bad money habits. And then also just like acknowledging like this is something that drives my husband crazy, but I like to just like, I probably need to reel myself in a little bit.
I do.
Something you do for fun that doesn't cost anything.
We love being outside. We love hiking and playing a lot of sports. So playing basketball, going for hikes, spending time with family outside. That's just a fun weekend for us, for sure.
All right. And to wrap it up, what is something that you would like to improve about your personal finances this year?
I would like to improve. I feel like during the time of COVID, like I'm a bit of an introvert myself. And so I don't necessarily like go out and spend time. I have friends that I communicate with, but maybe not spending so much on myself as far as experiences. So it's fitting that this was about self-care. Like, I think that's an area for me to pay attention to in this new year, is making sure that there's money put aside just for me. Now that, COVID, people are out more, having some experiences with my girlfriends that are outside of my husband and my boys and my larger family. Just doing things that are really for me is something that I want to prioritize.
Yeah, it's easy to get wrapped up as a mom and a wife and, as a caregiver for others and put yourself on the back burner. But it is so important that you set aside a few dollars for yourself, that you take time for yourself, because if you don't replenish, how can you give? You can't be in a position to pour into others' cups if your cup is empty. So I love that. What's your action item that's going to make sure that you follow through on that?
So my action item, I am huge into having buckets, like savings buckets. I think that is something that helps, particularly with the couples that I work with. Like, let's identify what's important to you. What do you value? Because I love that saying, don't tell me what you value. Show me your checkbook and your calendar, and I'll tell you what you value, right? From looking at that. So I think something that would really be an action item is setting up. I like Ally or Capital One 360, where you can set up those different buckets, setting up a self-care bucket and starting to fund that. I like to say, like a bill. Like, okay, I pay my mortgage, I pay my Verizon bill. Now I'm also funding that self-care bucket so that money is there when I go to spend it.
I love it. I love it. I love it. All right. We have made it to the finish line of the final sprint. You won the race,
Yay!
The worth listening race. Here's your medal. We're putting it on top there. You're standing on the podium. So this is your time to shine. Tell us where we can find you, how we can support you, what cool things you have coming up. I heard you say you do a thing once a month. I definitely want to share that with my community, because I think people are always looking for a way to kind of like get their toe in the door and like understand a little bit more before they decide what they want to do. So
yes, I love that. So yeah, I love speaking. I love giving workshops. It was something that I'd done that online during COVID, but I appreciate doing that out in person again now too. So you can find everything about me on my website, which is amyscottcoaching.com. And there's a page on there for events, Lauren, and you will see all the information about the monthly budgeting and workshops for couples. And I did really create that because I wanted to create a way for people to get value right away. So there's tangible steps. It's a very action-oriented workshop that people can take steps from it and go to implement those right away for their couple. There's also something cool on my website, I think it's cool, is a PDF, like a resource I've put together for 3 steps that couples can take to uplevel their budget. So if you're somebody who likes to participate in live workshops, great, that's fun. Or if you're somebody who's like, I want to read more about how to put some of these action steps in place, that resource is on my website as well.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for coming on the show. I know so many people are going to be benefiting from the advice you shared today. It was a great story. I loved hearing your money story.
Thank you. Thank you. I loved sharing it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Whether you're currently in a relationship or not, there are so many valuable things to take away from what Amy shared today. We've talked many times on the podcast about how our upbringing plays a role in the way we think about our finances as adults. Sometimes this manifests itself, causing us to be at a job where we're burnt out, we don't really want to be there, and we're trying to pursue things that we don't really care about, but we feel like we need. That is one way that, your upbringing can kind of carry on over if it's something that you've experienced in your past. But it can also cause a lot of stress and turmoil in the relationships that you have, including couples, since each person has their own way of thinking about and handling money. Amy shared the importance of looking at your why instead of focusing on the shoulds. And I think we can take it a step further and dive into the how. Set aside some time this week to think about what you really want your life to look like instead of what you think it should look like. This will allow you to start thinking about what steps you can take to start living the life you want. As always, if you have questions or suggestions for guests, if you would like to be on the show yourself, please do not hesitate to reach out, worth-listening.com or podcast@worth-listening.com.